Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Cleartone Podcast. I'm your host, David Rodriguez, and today's special guest is none other than Carlos Peralta, trumpet player, musician, educator extraordinaire. So, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, David.
Great. So, I wanted to go ahead and start off by asking you, as I do all my guests, is how did you get involved with music?
So I was a little sixth grader when I started music. Um, I believe it was beginning handbell and choir. The teacher came into our class and she was like, "Hey, if you join, my zero period, so come at 7 a.m. at school. At the end of the year, we take you to Knott's Berry Farm." And I was like, "Yeah, I want to do that." And so I started singing and playing handbells. That's how I got introduced into the music world. And
Interesting.
then, yeah. And then I stuck with that through eighth grade. I was in the advanced handbells. Um, and I joined band in eighth grade.
Okay. And so, what school district is that? Because handbells, that's not a big thing. That's pretty rare to have a handbell program in the public school system.
Yeah. No, yeah. It was, so I grew up in the Azusa Unified School District.
Okay.
And the program was at, I think it's still there, at Center Middle School. Just because the choir teacher there was an alum from Azusa Pacific University, which had a handbell program back in the day.
Okay. Yeah. Because like I said, there are not a lot of program or not a lot of yeah public school programs have handbells. And I didn't know what a handbell that there was such thing as a handbell group until I went to college because that's
Uh-huh.
like big in the Lutheran church and
Yeah.
other denominations as well. But that was my first experience with that, and I was just really surprised handbells like in the public school system. Wow. Okay. And then you started in the eighth grade playing the trumpet.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Did you continue on with choir until eighth grade, or
Yeah, so I doubled up. So I was just doing advanced handbells at that point in eighth grade, and I added wind ensemble into that.
okay? Well, that's cool incentive. You get to go to Knott's Berry Farm at the end of the year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for free.
Yeah. There you go for free. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what was that experience from eighth grade going on? Eighth grade into high school, um, being involved with the trumpet. Did you stop playing handbells, or did they offer handbells later on?
No, in high school there was no more handbells, so I stopped playing handbells at that point. But I continued on trumpet. I had more fun with it, I guess. There was a lot more to do. So in high school, my main emphasis was marching band and jazz band. So I was dedicated, spending 12-hour days at school for the marching band program, and then jazz band on top of that.
Okay. So did you do any private lessons during that time, or you just whatever you did on the ensembles?
It was mostly personal practice. I believe my sophomore year, I started taking lessons with Dave Evans, who was teaching at Cal State Long Beach, I believe, at that time. Um, Most of the more advanced trumpet players were taking lessons with him, so I asked him like, "Hey, who are you taking lessons with? Can you give me the info?" And they helped me because I guess he had like a wait list to take on students, but they put in a word saying like, "Hey, we know this guy. He wants to take lessons with you. Can you kind of shoe him in?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course." And so I did about not the whole school year, but like three-fourths, I would say, of lessons before I kind of stopped.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Dave Evans, great trumpet player, great clinician as well. We had him when I was first teaching. When I first started teaching,
Mhm.
came in as a guest conductor for middle school kids,
Oh.
and then from that, yeah, and then I guess from my understanding, they had him for a while as an instructor, as a I guess honor guest band director for
Mhm.
that group for a couple of years. And then I know that a couple of those kids, this was out in Anaheim, would like go, trumpet players would go to his house on the weekends to study with him. So that's pretty intense. Oh, I guess pretty intense for middle school kids, and then to travel that far from Orange County all the way to, the
Yeah,
foothills of Azusa to take lessons with Dave Evans or
yeah,
Glendora, I think. Yeah,
yeah. Glendora. It's
yeah. So, what was there any preparation when you were going into college? Like, did you know what you wanted to do when you were going to college?
so when I was a senior, um, I was planning on going to 4 year college. You know, the traditional mindset, but I didn't get into any place because I was planning as a computer science major.
Okay.
So at that time, the career that degree was really impacted. So I was getting a lot of rejections from the programs and schools as well. So at that point, I made up one line. I'm gonna have to go to community college, and I decided to go with Mount Sac. I don't know. I didn't know anything about Mount Sac or Citrus College, which are the local colleges, community college around here. But I was just attracted to Mount Sac, maybe because it was not down the street for me.
Right.
Um, so then at that point, I just kind of stopped focusing on like trying to get into a 4 year college. I was just like, I'm going to Mount Sac. Uh, I know what to do. I need to start looking into the music program, what I'm going to do there. Because I was planning on doing music as a minor, not
Okay.
as my full time major. Um, yeah.
So, was there any specific experience when you were at Mount Sac or as you were going to make that transition into Mount Sac that you said, okay, maybe computer science isn't what I'm going to do. Maybe I want to put my focus into music. Or was there any experience?
Yeah, so that whole mindset I had of I'm going to Mount Sac, that's it, was first the fall semester of my senior year. So then my spring semester, which like the final months of my high school career, my band director was like, "Hey, I am like one of the co-directors at this youth orchestra. Do you want to do it?" And so I was like, "Yeah, I'm down." And he's like, "Yeah, but it's gonna be in Mission Viejo, so you're gonna have to commute." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't. My parents will drive." And so I did that youth orchestra, South Coast Youth Symphony Orchestra,
Okay.
and I met the main director, the musical director. His name is Rocky Lee. He's a phenomenal instructor. I From the first rehearsal I had with him, I admired the way he taught, the passion he had, and he kind of was like that influence of like, I could see myself doing that, striving for that. And then at the end of the season, we performed at the Walt Disney Concert Hall. And after that performance, I got in the car with my parents, and then I told them, "Hey, I'm not gonna be a computer science major. I'm gonna do music."
Okay. And they were supportive of that?
My my dad not so much at first, and my mom she was, but then once I told him the plan of I want to be an instructor, I want to be a teacher, an educator, they were more like, "Oh, okay, so you want to have like a more secure job than freelancing?" And I was like, "Yes, that's a little bit more secure." So they
Right.
were more uh, calm, more tranquil with that idea.
Yeah, I bet. So that's cool. Cool. So I didn't know that you first started off um, wanting to do computer science, and then it was that transition that you decided, oh, I'm gonna study music. What
Yeah.
while you were studying at Mount Sac,
Uh,
what, what was that experience like being there?
um, it was it was a good foundation for what was gonna be my like professional career, I guess. I do wish that I would have taken the music program a little bit more serious in the sense of I was still adapting to getting used to practicing every day, having a set routine. It wasn't until like my last 2 semesters there that my trumpet teacher there was Barbara Laranga. Fantastic, fantastic player and fantastic person as well. We had a lesson where she was like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I want to be an educator, but I also want to be good at my trumpet." And so we had like a good talk. She taught me, this is what you're going to need to do. You're going to have to step it up, practice, you know, every day for a certain amount of time to start taking steps in that right direction. I kind of wish I would have started that seriousness earlier, but other than that, it was a good place for me. I don't regret ever going to Mount Sac.
Okay, yeah, no. What was there any I guess musical highlight from that experience while you were there, like something that you guys did that was like this is great, or one of the better memories, musical memories there at Mount Sac.
I don't remember. I don't remember the program. I don't remember what semester, but the music program at Mount Sac had a brass choir, and that was my introduction to chamber music. And so there was one semester where we did it, where we had an actual brass choir. Four trumpets, four trombones, four horns, three tubas. And I was like, yeah, like I really really dig this, and it was really fun getting to school Fridays at 8 a.m. like old times to play brass choir rep.
Okay, yeah. And then was there anything? Your lessons were probably the dominant. What sounds like the dominant thing that helped push you and prepare you for transferring over to APU. And what was that process like? Could you talk about that a little bit?
So I had a my best friend was at APU at the time, so I started talking to him. Like, hey, I'm thinking about transferring over to APU. What's it like? Who's the teacher? And so he told me about him. I went and listened to the ensembles perform whenever he performed. I'd go and watch to see the program. And then me and him start. He kind of gave me like little lessons according to what he was studying with. Robert Slack. He was studying with Robert Slack, who still teaches there. And so I started getting familiar even before transferring. So my last semester at Mount Sac, I kind of was in that situation where like I had my foot in APU already. People already were starting to know me while I was transitioning out of Mount Sac.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. I think that's good advice for anybody who is in a community college situation and looking to go to a 4-year university. Is kind of whatever 4-year university you're looking at. If you have the opportunity to go ahead and kind of immerse yourself a little bit and kind of figure out what they do and what their program's like, and even meeting with the director, like those are concepts for me I didn't recognize as a high schooler.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could be true for some folks, and you yourself were more experienced, more mature, and able to figure that out and kind of know who to talk to, like your friend.
Yeah.
So what was you then? You transferred out. You went to APU. You did your undergrad there. What was that like? What was that experience like? How did that prepare you?
It was definitely the first year was definitely really rough in the sense of I wasn't so used to the course load at community college, or more so Mount Sac. My classes were kind of spread out throughout the day and throughout the week, so I'd have like band and then like a 3 hour gap and then an English class, and the next day I'd have some math class in the beginning of my day, then another huge gap, and then jazz band. And so it was spread out. I'd go home, come back, kind of situation. But at APU, the course load was like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. just based on ensembles and all the required classes, and then practicing and all that. So that was a very drastic change, but I was able to adapt to it, thankfully within the year. And again, it was like a healthy competition when it came to the ensembles, in that we were all pushing each other, trying to not stay stagnant when it came to mostly jazz band. Jazz band was the big ensemble at the school.
Okay, cool. So when you're finishing up APU, the degree you got, you want to share with us what your degree was, what you ended up getting as a degree?
Yes, so I my bachelor's is in uh, music with an emphasis in education, but it's the BA, not the BM. Which the BA had general eds in it, so you had to take English, math, all the good stuff. While the BM is more like, regardless of if you want to be an instrumentalist, you got to take choir as well. I came in at as the degree was changing, and so my what are they called, the counselor
Right.
told me
Yeah.
it's just better for you to stay on the BA track, because then you'll be out in 3 years rather than having to stay four.
Right. Yeah. And so when you were when you finished your degree, what was the preparation for then going and getting a master's degree in trumpet performance?
So with during my undergrad, I was studying with Robert Slack, uh, phenomenal trumpet player as well. He introduced me to the Bill Adam routine, which a lot of the concepts and ideas are stuff that I still follow to this day. I think about it every time I pick up the horn. But he told me, if you want to be a great teacher, you have to know how the trumpet works, how the inside and out. You got to be able to play it. Um, and so as I was graduating, I was thinking, I want to do a master's in trumpet performance. I've always played in sections, wind ensemble, orchestra, jazz. I've always been the section player, but I wanted to be take a step into principal or solo. Have a voice of my own that I've never really gone towards, because I was always very super critical about my playing. So I started practicing more. Started talking to Mr. Slack again about I want to do a master's in trumpet performance. I still didn't know I wanted to go whether to APU or I was looking at Fullerton, Cal State Fullerton for the masters, but it ended up being working out at APU just because I knew the teacher. We had been talking about it, so he knew I was coming in, and about a month or so before applying, I guess, um, I started thinking about what I wanted to focus on. I want to be a great round trumpet player, but I was looking at my history and I'm like, I've played in orchestra, I've played in wind ensembles, I've played in jazz bands, but I haven't really played in orchestra or much like chamber esque. And so I was like, I kind of want to focus on that aspect, on that genre of trumpet playing, I guess. And so then I also knew that David Washburn was teaching at APU, and again another amazing talented trumpet player who he plays principal at the LA Chamber Orchestra. And
Right.
so as I applied, I was still with Robert Slack, but then I was like, what? This is what I want to focus on. This is where I want to be defined as, like Carlos. Oh yeah, chamber guru or something.
Right. Yeah.
um, so I made that switch the second semester I was at APU.
Okay. And then I guess looking back at the overall kind of experience at APU, what was, or actually before we get there,
Mm.
what was, and you might have talked about this, but that experience like from going from a bachelor's degree to that master's degree in performance, like as far as how you practiced, maybe the workload as far as ensembles that you were doing.
Mm.
What was that like? Did you see any significant changes in that?
I definitely got even more serious than I was for my undergrad. Um, I was definitely in that mentality of, like I haven't practiced blank amount, and people would be like, "Hey, you want to go hang out? You want to go grab dinner, etc." And I'd be like, "I can't. I need to practice," which I found was more easier to say as a master's student than an undergrad student. I'd always cave in as an undergrad. They'd be like, "Hey, let's go," and I'd be like, "All right." But as a master's student, I was more disciplined. I guess I had the mentality of like, I'm pursuing this master's. I need to strive for it. I can't um, half do it.
Right. Yeah. You can't slack off on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of nights where we were missing you at Applebee's. never went around to Applebee's in the time I've been at APU, but I know that's the hang after every major midterm or finals.
Or
But
performance.
yeah, so what was I guess looking back at it all, what was one thing that you think you would have liked to have done differently? I'm sorry, differently.
I definitely would have. So I was doing. Um, APU stopped having a brass choir when I was doing my master's program. Um, so my ensembles were orchestra and jazz ensemble to keep both sides of the playing on par. And then I started doing I did the quintet all 2 years to get that chamber. And I was doing an outside chamber group, Canyon City Brass, as well. What I would have liked to do done differently was with the chamber program. If I would have talked, I wish I could have talked to the director um, and asked if it was possible to do like a chamber group where it had a trumpet. Um, and I tried looking up pieces, but I don't think I'm looking right. But I've seen on YouTube where it's like cello, violin, and trumpet, or violin, piano, trumpet kind of chamber um, pieces, ensembles. I would have really liked to do stuff in that realm. Um, and I think it would have been possible if I would have just asked, but I was also still a little bit timid of like, what if they say no?
Right. Yeah. I think that gets a lot of people. What do they say no? But I guess at the end of the day, the least they can do, or all they can say is no, and you're not at a loss.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, yeah, cool. So now that we're kind of changing gears a little bit, and you mentioned Canyon City Brass. What did you feel at all when you were well, you talked about it a little bit that you
Mm-hmm.
wanted an emphasis in more solo playing as well as chamber playing. So when you how was that? How did Canyon City Brass happen? How were you able to be a part of that group?
So the musical director Mike Edwards messaged me um, back in 2000, summer of 2017,
Okay.
2017. And he was like, "Hey, we need a trumpet player," and so I was sitting fourth chair for a good amount of time, and then my first year as a grad student, I think we lost our first, second, and third trumpet. And so he was kind of in a, like, oh man, what are we gonna do, this and that. And so I kind of stepped up and was like, all right, I'll play principal. I'll be principal and play like first and auxiliary instruments. You know, E flat, piccolo, trumpet, and then let me call up a couple of of guys who um, can handle the chairs and stuff. So I called up a friend from Mount Sac, a friend from high school, and then one of my fellow trumpet players from APU as well, uh, Ephraim, Thomas, and Kyle. And so I was like, there we have our section for trumpets, and that pushed me into a position that I hadn't been. You know, principal trumpet, first trumpet, and then playing the auxiliary, which was like E flat, which had most of the melodies, and then piccolo trumpet, which is the higher tessitura of the trumpet voicing and stuff. Um, and then the leadership that came with it, having to lead the trumpets, having to lead the rest of the brass ensemble. It was super exciting. I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, this is my time to shine." But it was a little, stressful when certain things, didn't work out, and I was like, "How do I work around this situation that I've never faced before?" I've always been the section player. I've always like, "Hey, principal trumpet, what do we do?" And this time, people were like, "Hey, principal trumpet, what do we do?"
Right, they're looking for
So
you, to you for answers. Yeah.
yeah, so it was learning to equal be confident, and when you said something, to stick with it, so that they would be able to follow and be like, okay, he's a good example to follow.
Right, right. Yeah, and I know for me at least, one of the reasons like I pushed for the brass group when I was doing my undergrad, and I didn't necessarily know that I would be doing that outside of school, like after I had graduated, but it was that experience, having that experience that enabled me to then learn how to negotiate with folks, put a group together and then, do that. And so, that's how we met initially when I reached out to you. I think I reached out to Professor or Dr. Whitmore at Mount Sac,
Mm-hmm.
and then he, suggested a couple of folks, and you were one of them. And that's how kind of I put my group together at that time. Um, so with that, with all those experiences, it makes you better prepared to do other things in life. What is, I guess, what are you're playing in school, you're taking those experiences, and then you're applying them in real life. What do you have any examples of that, of things you've done or lessons you've taken and concepts that you've had to apply in a performance situation?
Definitely. One of the big ones is sight reading. Trying to When you get music in front, trying to play it as near as perfect as possible on like the first, second try. That's definitely one of the things that in real world you'll show up and they'll be like, "Oh, we're playing these three songs," and so you're like, "Okay, cool." And then last minute they'll be like, "Oh, we're also playing this." Um, Transposing is another big one for the chamber orchestra kind of settings, where you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna play Dvorak or something," and then you look at the piece and it's an A, and you're like, "Oh, okay," and being able to transpose on the spot. Um, and then just taking from all my all my private instructors, my ensemble directors, let's start with the educators, applying that to private lessons when I teach. Um, just being, thinking back to how they taught me certain things and how everybody taught me differently. It has shown me that not every student learns the same way. You have to try various techniques, various approaches, and see which one they're like, "Oh yeah, this works for me." That's definitely one of them. And then when it comes to quintet, brass choir, seeing how the directors would think, how they would, try to think how the music was to be portrayed, how they would lead the rehearsals and such. I've been able to apply that in, quintet where it's individually run most of the time, and then brass ensemble being able to share ideas with, the ensemble.
Right, that's all good stuff. That's definitely good stuff. And then, really when you're in chamber groups, at least for me, I don't know what it's like for you, but I found that most of the work, my freelance work, has been through, my ensemble. And so, I think anybody who's studying right now, I think one of the benefits of being in a chamber group, obviously, you're exploring different music, both original music and transpositions, but also it's another opportunity to, make money to support yourself.
Yeah.
Being in a chamber group, because there's not always going to be just solo performance situations. There are going to be situations where you're going to have to, play with others. So at least for me, I found that I get more opportunities playing when I'm playing with the groups or I'm playing in a small group setting. Have you found that to be the same for you?
Yeah. On an idea like that, we were always the brass ensemble has always been like a friends getting together to make music concept. And when we get paid, it's kind of like, oh, this is fun, But we're mostly doing it because we want to play music, make music. The camaraderie with everyone. But then we're like, let's take a chunk of the ensemble, 5 people, and it's easier to um, advertise to sell ourselves. 5 people coming to play at your school, rather than, oh, we have 12 people coming to play at school, because to anybody who's gonna pay, they're just seeing dollar signs per person. So it does benefit playing in a chamber smaller group, in that situation. Um, yeah, because most of my it's just me gigs have always been church gigs. Usually Easter, in
Okay.
my experience.
And you're playing as a soloist?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mine's the total opposite, where I'm always there. I'm hired individually, but
Uh huh.
I'm part of a chamber group. Which I've always enjoyed being a brass organ and you got choir. In
Yeah.
most of the situations, I did a couple of Christmas times where I'm by myself, and you're playing solo. But most of my experience has been playing in a chamber group. So I thought that was really interesting. And for me at least, it was I wanted to get this experience when I was in college. I didn't necessarily think, oh well, this is you know
Mm-hmm.
supplementary money that I'm going to be making through, chamber group. It was just fun to do. Like you said, you
Yeah.
just you're hang. It's a hang with everybody, and then when you get paid,
Yeah.
it's like cool, we can get paid. What has been, your practice routine, or what is your practice routine these days? Now that we're kind of here at home.
I'm right now mostly, um, I'm mostly doing maintenance with little goals. Trying to
Okay,
take little goals rather than having like a big goal. Because I think I've always had the idea of big goals, like, oh, I need to be able to play this piece in a certain amount of time. Um, but focusing on little goals, I think I've been finding more success with. Because I guess the my idea of it is, if I'm like, oh, I need to have blank done, ready to go, or etc., and I don't, I see it as a 0 out of 1. But if I'm like, oh, I want my flexibility to be as smooth as possible. I want to be able to play my G in tune, et cetera, et cetera. I can be like, I've had success with 6 out of the 8 little things, and then I can focus even more. Um, my basic daily routine, and I think having a routine is important because it gives you, a foundation of everything. And this is something that I learned from my teachers. I start off with Jimmy Stamp, buzzing the mouthpiece.
Right.
Um, I do. It's what did I write? Page 5, and then I do a variation of the Jimmy Stamp from Boyd Hood, one of his mouthpiece exercises. Um, with the idea that the as I'm buzzing the mouthpiece, it's not I'm playing the trumpet. I'm warming up my face. I'm getting blood to where I need to get it to, and I'm waking up my ears since I believe your ears, you listening is very important to the trumpet. So that's my idea of the mouthpiece warm up. Then I do the 3B, I think, still from Stamp, the extended, um, the extended one. I forget. I just know it as Stamp 3B. And then I do some Chickowitz flow studies. That again, connecting my air, not thinking up and down, flat out, um, and I'm expanding my range at the same time. And then I do some chromatics with tonguing the arpeggio of whatever note I started on. So if I start on F sharp, I go up and then down 2 octaves back to the center, and then I do the same idea but arpeggio. So F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and so on. So then the next one I start on G, same thing, but I'm doing the G major arpeggio and so on. And then I starting with when COVID when COVID started in March, I started working my lip flexibility out of the Bai Lin book. I don't know if you've ever heard of
No,
the
I
Bai
own that
Lin.
book. That's a great book. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book. Mr. Washburn showed me. He gave me his warm up packet, and it was in there. And so I was like, "Hey, what's Bai Lin?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a lip flexibility book." And so I found it online. I recently purchased the physical. There's something about physical books that I enjoy, but I've been mostly my lip flexibility has been mostly that. It's real. I have found a lot of success with that book. I don't know if you've had similar successes with that book, but I recommend it. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, the violin. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I start with. That's my warm up. Getting my lips to be flexible.
Uh huh.
Like okay, wake up, and then I go from there. But no, yeah, a great book. I was introduced to that book by, um, funny enough, a friend who was a grad student,
Uh
getting
huh.
his master's degree, and he was sitting in the ensemble with us, and he was a student of Dave Washburn, and he had that book one day, and I was like, "Hey, what's that book?" And he's like, "Oh, this is the lip flexibility book," and I go,
Yeah.
"Really?" And so I copied some of the exercises from it, and then I just bought it that summer. So no, I've had that book for a while. Yeah, that's the one I start with, and I just go, you know,
Yeah.
down from there, or I start on concert B flat, and then I just work my way down.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's
So yeah, so I that concept of little pieces, and I think that's like you and I both attended those online sessions of that Tom Hooten gives, and he's talked
yes.
about, I think it's on his wall, like it's in Japanese phrases that he has,
Yeah.
and that's one of the phrases, just a little bit at a time. And then when you mentioned, little goals as opposed to a big goal, this piece by whenever, having it broken down, like one of the things that I took away from that, from what you said, which is similar to what Tom Hooten said in his seminars, was that circle. Do you remember that circle chart that he gave? That Raymond Mayse circle chart.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
like a
Yes. Yes.
circle, or it was almost like a nucleus, and
Yeah.
within the circle there was it was circled in, and it was everything that you knew, and there was like little blotches outside of that, and it was things that you could kind of do, and then outside of the circle was all the things that you wish you could do but you couldn't do. And so it was, you were building out that center circle until you were hitting one of the blotches and you were getting better and more consistent, and then you just kept building, and so eventually you could do those things that you weren't capable of doing. But it was because of, I'm breaking it down and I'm making them smaller chunks. I think that's super important, what you said, and then it just rings true with what someone like Tom Hooten, who is a professional musician, says as well.
Yeah. I definitely took that from him, that idea of, breaking it down and just, I think he even takes it like a step further and says, like, every time you practice, have a goal that you can achieve within that practice session.
Right. Yeah, yeah, because like I know I've been in that situation where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go practice, and it was just routine. It's just I practiced, and that's what I was gonna do. But
Yeah.
at the end of it, it was like, well, what was the purpose of that? What was I like? What was my goal?
Yeah.
I
And I definitely think that, as especially right now, we're like, it's COVID and we're like locked down, or we can't really go out and play with people. The Doing the routine, you have to keep it, you know I guess, fresh, spicy. um and so, like, I listed what my routine is, but like, I don't just do that top to bottom. I'm like, all right, cool. Some days I will, do long tone. I'll incorporate long tones into, an exercise and hold it out. Chromatics, get to the top, hold it out, and then another day I might like do the same thing, but then try to play it as loud as I can, then bring it back or inverse it. Always trying to do something different to keep it fresh, building off the routine, I guess.
yeah, you want to keep it exciting because at some point it gets stagnant, and it's like,
Yeah,
okay, I can do this.
yeah,
What's next? No,
yeah,
yeah. One of the things I liked, and that I don't always put into practice, was his practice sheet where he had everything listed down, and it had like the days that he did it. And so he was
yeah,
like I'm not doing this every day. I'm not doing, everything on my list every day. I'm picking what I'm going to do, and if I do, legato scales, 7 days on day 8, I really don't need to do that, or I don't have to emphasize that.
yeah.
I could do tonguing scales or what have you. So yeah, I think that's like another way of keeping it fresh. Do you have any like visuals or like a mindset? You talked about that a little bit about what you want to accomplish. Are there any other things?
I I have where I have like my little like trumpet area, I guess. I have in like I just tape simple pieces of paper, like some of the I know I was talking about little goals, but some of like the stuff I want to be able to do within, a couple months. Just as a reminder what the goal is, so like one of them is, be able to play the what is it, the trumpet concerto by what's his name, Oscar Bohm.
Yeah.
And so like that's there to kind of be like, okay, and then in ideally, I don't want to have so much clutter on the wall, but I'm like, okay, what do I need to do in that piece? And so I'll, look at the piece and be like, okay, so I need to be able to have, a 2 octave slur, so working on slurs. Oh, there's a lot of double tonguing towards the end. I got to make sure I'm hitting double tonguing. It helps me build on top of the routine what I need to be working on, which is an idea that again I took from Tom Hooten. He mentions it when in that spreadsheet too. I think he said when I'm working on a specific piece, I'll look at it and be like, okay, in this I need to be hitting these areas for sure because the pieces that I'm working on have this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of that concept of backwards design where you figure out what the big goal is, and then you decide, okay, what are some things, at least in education, what are some things, like what are my markers that tell me that my students are reaching that level, that we're going in the right direction to get to that big goal. And then what are the individual activities that are going to take place that get us to that marker that then tell us whether we're getting to that goal. So it's like the concerto in F, I think it's an F, um, right? That's your big goal, and then you're
Yeah.
deciding, you know, at least the triple or the double tonguing, the two octave slurs. Those are things that I identify as being markers to tell me that I'm going in that direction, and then you're creating the activity, the everyday activity to get you to those points
Yes.
via those little goals. Yeah. So it's that same concept.
Yeah.
What so for you right now? What are your horns of priority? Like what going down the list of the horns that you're playing? What do you find has been um, listing the list of importance of your
um,
trumpets?
I think I'm right now getting familiar or getting re-familiar with my B flat because I just switched over from I was playing on a bench 65B, which is
Okay.
like a intermediate trumpet, I believe, to what is it called? French Besson
Okay.
Classic, uh, which is I done some research on it. Um, it's a good horn, but it is a little bit more uh, responsive than the other horn. So I'm getting used to this B flat again because I was playing on it before, kind of didn't like it, but I did a mouthpiece change in April or May. I don't remember. I went from a 3C Bach 3C to a Bach 1C,
Okay.
um, and so the horn is different from the 3C. So I'm getting used to that. So that's like my main horn right now, and then I always touch my C trumpet because that's the only other trumpet I have. um, so I do my second set. I'll usually end my routine, my first set, with C trumpet on Clark's. Doing study number 2 or 3. I'll switch between those two. And then my second set will be mostly on C trumpet because I want to be. Um, I want C trumpet to be my main horn,
Okay.
but I think I'm still in the process of finding the right one, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, yeah. I, from my understanding, a lot of folks or a lot of guys, um, like their B flat is like the one they stay with, and it's always like everything else, C's or E flats or piccolos that they're like all constantly changing. So yeah. So what quick? I'm curious. What made you decide to do that mouthpiece switch from the 3C to that 1C?
You know, I don't know. I just got kind of curious. I guess I was like,
Okay.
this I've played on it before, like like one day or something, just for funsies, and I always hated it. I was like, it's too big. I don't like. I just my range is like drastically even less, and I think I think I wanted to challenge myself to see how much I had grown from 18-year-old fresh out of high school student to a 20-25 year old who's been taking lessons, gotten serious, and it has worked a ton more than the 3C. I have like I like this is my main mouthpiece now. Like it's no question.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Were you ever like when you were going in? Were you told you got to be everyone plays on a 3C or everyone plays on a different mouthpiece, or was just whatever you were most comfortable with and they were willing to work with you?
In high school, it was definitely like the whole, oh, you got to buy 3C. That's the way to go. That's the way. So I followed. I was like, yeah, okay. Bought a 3C. I was like, all right, cool. And then when I bought the the bench, the it came with a 3C mouthpiece, and so I had two. And one of my friends was like, "Hey, want to trade? I have a 1C." So I got this mouthpiece back then, and it's always been with me. But then as I got older, like community college was the first one where like I'm like looking at the mouthpieces and everyone's playing different everything. And I'm like, huh, I wonder why not a 3C. Um, so I stuck with the 3C, and then I got to APU, and then I think with my teachers and everything, and then my own researching and stuff, it's like whatever gets the job done for you, you know, use that. It shouldn't be like oh, everyone's playing, the smallest, aperture, smallest, shallowest bowl. You got to do that too. It's like, no, that's dumb. And then I think the right equipment for the right job is also a big, um, a big thing that people sometimes don't think about.
Right. Yeah. I certainly fell into that kind of mindset early on. Like I think I went from a 7C to a 5C my freshman year, and then
Huh.
sophomore year switched over to a 3C, and then rocked a 3C in college my first 2 years, and then switched over to the 1.5 that I've been playing on. Um, so yeah, and interestingly enough, like you would think 3C was a bigger mouthpiece than a 7C, but it's not. It's a shallower mouthpiece, from my
Yeah.
understanding. Yeah.
No, yeah,
So
I. Uh,
no, no, go ahead.
oh, no, I was going to say, sorry, I just remembered why I did the switch. There was a reason. Um, I wanted to go to a 1.5. I wanted to see what the big deal about it. And then I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe a 1.25. And so then I was like, you know what? I have a 1C. So I'm still figuring out mouthpieces. But so my thought was, oh, the 1C is closer to the 1.25 C. But I ended up buying. So I love the 1C. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna pull the trigger. I'm gonna buy the 1.25. And I hated it. I hate the 1.25. It feels smaller than a 3C. Um,
Really?
yeah, to me, it feels just a tiny bit, not like drastically, but it feels smaller than the 3C for some reason.
Yeah, I felt like a bowl, like a fish bowl. It was just I yeah, I felt so much more comfortable on the 1.5 than I did on a 1.25. But right, interesting. Yeah, and then you have an allergy to metal, correct?
Yes and no. I haven't officially like tested for it. When I started noticing like some irritation, I was playing on a GR mouthpiece.
Okay.
Um, and so then after that, I switched to gold, and I wasn't having issues and stuff. But again, in when I did the mouthpiece change, my 1C is not gold plated, and I haven't had any issues with it. So if I had any allergies, it was something with the GR.
Okay.
And it might have even been like the mouthpiece pouch I had it in, because it was a different one than what I have right now. So it might have just been a random event that happened with that mouthpiece. Um, but I
Okay.
haven't had any issues with this 1C. So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
yeah.
So, what would be one, as we're kind of getting to a close here?
Mm.
What was, I guess, one of the most impactful performances? You're surveying, all your college career. What performance sticks out to you?
I think the biggest one was definitely my pre-recital for my master's degree. I had been preparing for it. So I was preparing to present it in April, the end of April this year, and then March happened with COVID and all that, and I actually got a viral bronchitis infection.
Oh
That's
wow.
that like a week after the the whole nation shut down. I got really sick and I thought I had it. I went to the doctor and they're like, "Nah, you just have a virus. You'll get over it within a few weeks." I didn't. So
Oh
I didn't get to. Well, I was recovering. I was still practicing and all that. Um, but I ended up doing my pre-recital in person for my teacher and Dr. John Burdett, who was the um, other required faculty at my pre-recital, and getting to perform since essentially that's like your test. That's the one where they're like, yeah, you can present your recital, or like, nah, you got to redo it again.
right.
I was very focused. I was very, like, I've prepared for this. I'm gonna have fun, and I did. I had fun. I definitely, it definitely went well, but it was mostly me being able to demonstrate to myself that yes, you are a trumpet player. Since I've always been, like I said, really critical of my playing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. I know exactly what you meant. It was like once you play the rep and it's like, yeah, I'm a trumpet player now, or
Yeah,
what one piece of advice or best piece of advice you received?
I'm gonna cheat and say two.
All right.
One of them was from Mount Sax uh, Jazz director of jazz, um, Jeff Elwood. Um, he in one of our rehearsals he said when you're practicing, you wanna be making mistakes because that means you're you're trying new ideas, you're trying new exercises and everything. If you sound amazing while you're practicing, you're not practicing. You're kind of showing off. So like people who like go to the high notes or like play that one lick, it's kind of like are you really? It goes back to that whole like are you like just mindlessly blowing or are you actually like I'm gonna get this done right now. So whenever I'm practicing and making mistakes, I'm always like I'm taking risks. I'm trying different stuff. So that's one of them. You want to always you don't want to sound perfect in the practice room, I guess.
Okay.
Obviously, that's like a generic. Like if you're doing run throughs, then yeah, you want to be trying to nail it and everything. But and the second one, that was in a lesson with David Washburn, and I kept I was always like a big like what's going on here, and whenever I would play something well, I would always be like, "Oh, that felt really good. Oh, that it feels really good right now." And he told me, "Don't be thinking about the feel. The feel, if it's good, bad, non-existent, you're bleeding. You know, the what you have to be thinking of is the music. That's what you have to be thinking of. Music, not the this feels good. This feels bad." And so, ever since that lesson, I've tried to like take out the word feel from my practicing when I'm performing, just because it gets your head out of the music if you're thinking that.
Yeah, that's good. My trumpet instructor studied with Armando Catala. I think right after he had left BSO,
Mm.
and I had complained about that. I go, it doesn't it doesn't feel good here. And he goes, David, let me tell you, I talked to Armando, one time, and he said there was only two times ever in his practicing or in performing that he felt good, that this felt good, and I was like, mind blown by that concept,
Yeah,
and you're sharing that same thing. It's like it doesn't matter what's going on here, you gotta make that music.
yeah,
Yeah, so it rings true for a bunch of professionals from different eras.
no, yeah.
Um, Final question for you, sir. What are you listening to these days? What's on
So
your playlist?
these days, like I'm listening to regular stuff, Christmas music, but I've been mostly listening to the I wrote it down. The Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra.
Okay.
Um, they're European orchestra. I really love everything they've been playing. They have, their orchestra, but then their brass have set concerts where it's just like the brass ensemble essentially of it. So I've been listening to them, and then I recently found the National Brass Ensemble album of Gabrielli.
Yeah. Oh, that stuff's good.
Yeah, so I started listening to it like last week, and so I've had that like just going since that's kind of like my jam, I guess.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, great. Well, thank you, Carlos, for coming on and spending some time here at Cleartone. Really appreciate you having you stopping by.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Great. Thanks. See you soon.